Part 1. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 1. Crimson Lips, Blurry Night. Tonight belongs to indulgence. In the center of the ballroom, men and women shook their bodies to the fullest, dancing to the beat of the music. Their snow-white thighs, sweaty chest muscles, female charm, and male hormones intertwined into a crazy and intoxicating whirlpool. In the corner of the dance floor, a man wearing Nike sportswear sat there, with cigarettes and wine in front of him. The heat waves and dust sounds around him seemed to have no effect on him. He just subconsciously turned his face, hidden in the dark blind spot of light. There were hot dancers who approached him and asked him to dance, but they were automatically rejected by his cold attitude. His whole person was really out of place here. A woman in white-collar work clothes covered her mouth and rushed off the dance floor to the restroom. At this time, the man picked up the cigarette on the table and put it into his pocket. He stood up and walked to the toilet. Like a hunter waiting for his prey, he now began to follow the traces of his prey. After the woman rushed into the toilet, she started vomiting directly at the sink. A sour smell immediately filled the toilet. The woman turned on the faucet and flushed the dirt in the sink while grabbing a handful of water and slapping it on herself. Face. The cold water hit her face, which made her sober for a moment from her ignited emotions on the dance floor. However, when she opened her eyes again, she was startled by the figure behind her in the mirror. You. The woman wanted to speak, but she couldn't. The other person's two fingers had already locked her neck, and she couldn't make a sound at all. The other person's movements were so familiar that they seemed to be doing something they often do. Things don't need to be deliberate, they just happen naturally. At the same time, the other person's other hand was raised, holding a knife. Although I don't like to talk nonsense, this is the rule of the club. I have to say, your sins have escaped secular sanctions, but they cannot escape our judgment. Puff. Without much prelude, the knife edge quickly penetrated the woman's chest and turned clockwise. The man's palm pressed against the wound to prevent blood from splattering. After the woman's body trembled twice, she fell to the ground as the man let go. The man began to rinse his knife and hands with the water in the sink. Then, he straightened his clothes in front of the mirror. He did all this very carefully and methodically. A young but pale face appeared in the mirror, handsome and with a touch of strange excitement. This should be the reason why he just killed someone. Killing people always brings this kind of pleasure to himself. He was also obsessed with this feeling of killing, and even seemed to be addicted to drugs, unable to extricate himself. The female corpse on the ground still had her eyes open, and she was still dead. The man took out a small bag from his pocket, which was full of luo, yin. He doesn't take this, because the pleasure the drug gives him is far inferior to the intense stimulation brought by killing. Snapped. The small bag was torn open, and luo, and yin were scattered around the female body. Later, the man threw the small bag next to the female body. This nightclub is not clean at all. The man believes that after discovering a female body strewn with drugs, the owner of this restaurant would never think of protecting the scene before calling 110. Finally, he looked deeply at the female corpse, took a deep breath, and experienced the final after-effects of the murder. The man's face finally returned to normal. He looked in the mirror and smiled, confirming that his smile had begun to change. After being natural and not so artificial, he opened the door of the women's bathroom, moved the sign that was being cleaned, and walked out. From beginning to end, he was sure that he had avoided all the camera corners and that he had not been noticed by the people around him. Of course, when he killed, he must have left a lot of traces, but he believed that the nightclub owner who was worried about being responsible would help yourself to deal with the aftermath, and at worst, dispose of the body, so that you can rest assured. After walking out of the nightclub, the cold wind outside hit him, and the man shivered, as if he had just returned to the earth from heaven. Yes, that nightclub, that toilet, and the female corpse were heaven to him, because I experienced the warm and comfortable feeling that can only be experienced in heaven. Life is beautiful. The man was talking to himself, his voice a little hoarse. Taking out his mobile phone, the man opened the taxi app and called a taxi. Soon, a driver took the order, and the other party called quickly. "Hey, is this Mr. Subai? Is your location correct? It's on the roadside behind the side entrance of Ranking nightclub, right?" Subai frowned slightly. This taxi-hailing software would automatically display all his registered names to the driver, which made him a little disgusted. Now, after releasing his suppressed emotions, he became very sober. "It is clear that the distance between my name and this place tonight is better." "Yes, I'm here," Subai replied. While paying attention to the time, he pulled up the collar of his sportswear, and put on the hat on the back, hiding his entire face except for a pair of eyes. "Okay, I'll be right over." The driver hung up the phone, but Subai's eyes narrowed slightly. The driver's tone seemed very urgent when he was on the phone just now. This was not the kind of shortness of breath just after exercise, but a natural emotional out-of-control reaction after experiencing a terrible thing. After killing someone, the brain has cooled down. Subai seemed very sensitive now. 3 minutes later, a black Audi car stopped. The driver was only 30 years old. His hair was a little messy and there were crumbs on his clothes. He looked like a typical private car owner who drove late at night to make money. However, Subai saw through the car window that there were several crumbs under the driver's seat. The cigarette butts that had been stamped out were flickering. A private car owner went out to do work late at night, but he didn't care about his car at all. Most people smoked in their cars and were reluctant to let the smell of smoke enter the car, but he just put out the unextinguished cigarette butts like this. He dropped it casually under the seat. "Get in the car, young man," the driver smiled and waved to Subai. Subai nodded. Instead of sitting directly in the back, he chose to go around the front of the car and sit in the passenger seat. "You have arrived at the designated location, the passengers have boarded the car, and now the navigation begins." The driver skillfully started the car and handed him a pack of cigarettes. "Smoking, nobody?" Subai shook his head and took out his cigarette. "I have." "Just like mine," the driver was very enthusiastic. "No." "Smoke it, you're welcome, smoke it, smoke it, smoke it, smoke it, smoke it." The driver's tone became urgent, but he didn't seem to realize his gaffe. Subai nodded and took out a cigarette from the other party's cigarette case. The driver happily turned his attention to the front again and continued driving. The car radio was playing a midnight hit program, singing "Sweet Honey" by Teresa Teng. However, halfway through the song, noise suddenly occurred. "Welcome to the horror radio show, I'm the host, I don't have a name, because names have no meaning here / Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 2. A sour smell suddenly came, and Subai frowned slightly. This 30-year-old driver was actually frightened to the point of urinary incontinence. He had the guts to hit someone and run away, but didn't have the guts to face the ghost who came to ask for his life. But, what is going on with all this? Subai could be sure that he was not hallucinating, so things seemed a little weird. He subconsciously opened the door, but the door was locked. The driver was so frightened that he didn't know what to do. He just kept shrinking under the seat. The little girl lying on the windshield was still staring at him. He kept giggling, but it made the driver more and more frightened. At the same time, Subai felt an icy chill on his neck. He looked down and saw that the female white-collar worker who was sitting in the back seat was squatting in the gap between the front seat and the back seat. At the same time, 2 hands strangled her neck tightly, just like he did to her in the toilet before. Sudbai pulled out the knife and cut it directly into the female white-collar's wrist. However, the next moment, the knife was stuck in the female white-collar's wrist and could not be pulled out. However, the strength of the female white-collar's hands has not slowed down at all, and has even become stronger than before. Breathing began to become more and more difficult, and his lungs felt like they were about to explode. However, Sudbai felt that he was born with a deep mental illness. In this situation, fear was not the thought in his mind. Instead of fear, it was a kind of absolute calmness and excitement, as if he had returned to the thrilling feeling when killing people. His brain had already produced a feeling that his whole body was floating, but Sudbai knew that this was not caused by his excitement, but because his brain began to lose consciousness due to suffocation. Click. Sudbai didn't instinctively grab the opponent's wrist with both hands from the beginning. He used a knife with one hand, but failed. This was a dead man. The knife was inserted into the body of a dead man, and the result proved to be meaningless. The other hand pulled down the adjustment lever of the seat. The seat fell backwards as much as possible with Sudbai's weight. The female white-collar worker was completely pressed under the seat, and her hands were forced release. Taking a deep breath and restraining the dizzy feeling in his mind, Sudbai pushed the seat with both hands, leaned sideways on the driver, pressed the button to unlock the door, and heard a click sound. The door lock was unlocked, and Sudbai rolled out of the car directly from the door on the left side of the driving position. The car actually kept moving forward at a speed of about 20 yards, but there was no feeling in the car that the car was moving. When Sudbai landed, he was face down due to inertia and rolled directly on the ground several times. There were many bruises on his body, but fortunately he hugged his knees subconsciously, and no important parts were harmed. There was a sudden sound of brakes, and the driver seemed to suddenly realize what he should do. However, when he just stopped the car, there was no time to deal with the handbrake or anything else, and when he leaned halfway out of the car door, half of his face collapsed. The girl was hanging directly at the door of the car. The limp calf with only a little bit of flesh remaining was dangling in front of the driver's eyes. The driver was so frightened that he let out another scream and voluntarily retracted back into the car. Inside, the girl also got in. Sudbai quickly got up from the ground. He didn't have time to check his injuries and immediately started running to one side of the road. Snapped. The rear door was opened, and the female white-collar worker kept laughing and started chasing after her. The uppers of her shoes kept rubbing against the ground, making a harsh sound. While running, Sudbai discovered that the environment on both sides of the road was changing rapidly. Originally, there were closed banks and convenience stores on both sides, but they began to turn into unfinished buildings, exposed steel bars, and protruding buildings. The concrete and dense weeds make it look very desolate. The Love Bar is located in an urban area, and it is impossible for such a group of buildings to appear around it. Even the flat road beneath my feet turned into a muddy road with gravel everywhere. Sudbai's feet slipped and he fell forward, falling into the sewage. Before he could get up, there was a whistling sound behind him, and 10 sharp objects pierced his back directly in the back muscles. Hiss. The stinging feeling made Sudbai take a breath, and the weight behind him pressed him into the sewage again as he was about to stand up with his hands. Hiss. The female white-collar worker's 10 sharp nails slid down Sudbai's back, and 10 bloody gashes appeared, tearing off a large piece of flesh on Sudbai's back. While Sudbai continued to endure the severe pain, one hand he grabbed the steel bar extending out from his side, and then forced his body to lean sideways. He pulled out the steel bar and placed it on the neck of the female white-collar worker. Boom! The female white-collar's body pressed down, as if she wanted to crush Sudbai to death. However, fortunately, the steel bar lay between the two of them, which relieved the female white-collar's strength and at the same time pulled her towards Sudbai's. On the left, the female white-collar worker rolled off Sudbai and fell into the mud. Sudbai quickly stood up, then directly picked up a concrete block on the side of the road, and hit the female white-collar worker on the head hard when she was about to get up. To be honest, if someone else encountered this situation, it would probably not be any better than the driver who had urinary incontinence in the car. But Sudbai was different. He was currently straddling the back of the female white-collar worker. On his back, he held a concrete block and kept hitting the female white-collar worker's head. Her head is so hard. This made a word come to Sudbai's mind: zombie. But fortunately, this female white-collar worker doesn't seem to be the type of zombie in Hong Kong zombie movies. Under her constant hammering, the back of the female white-collar worker's head has been dented by herself. It's probably stuck to the stone ground. His face must have been badly shaken at this time. However, just when Sudbai thought he could deal with this threat with his own hands, the female white-collar worker suddenly raised her legs, and her whole body stood up in a strange posture, head down and feet up. Sudbai, who was originally straddling the female white-collar worker, was thrown to the ground in front of her, and the concrete block in her hand was thrown away. Now the momentum was wrong again. Just as it happened, a figure appeared on the second floor of an unfinished building. The figure of a woman in an apron was shining here with a flashlight in her hand. The flashlight shone on Sudbai's face, making Sudbai unable to open his eyes, but he still heard the woman's cry. "Come up, come here." At this time, no matter what happened, the body of the female white-collar worker began to become more and more sinister. Sudbai rushed directly into the unfinished building on that side, and then went straight down the stairs with only bare cement. "Run upward." When they reached the second floor, the woman put the flashlight into Sudbai's hand and shouted to Sudbai, "Quick, go in and hide under the bed. She won't be able to find you under the bed." As soon as the woman finished speaking, she ran down the stairs where Sudbai came, looking very hurried. Sudbai suddenly felt that the woman looked familiar, but in the dark and relying on a flashlight that kept shaking, he couldn't see the face clearly, so Sudbai had to continue walking inside. It was an unfinished building with air leakage everywhere and no doors or windows, just dark square holes. But there are some simple furniture inside, such as chairs, cabinets, and beds. "Quick, go inside and hide under the bed. She won't be able to find you under the bed." What the woman said to him just now came to Sudbai's mind again. In this environment, in this weird atmosphere, it seems that there are not many choices. Boom. 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 There was a dull sound of going upstairs on the stairs outside, and the surrounding temperature was gradually lowering. The female white-collar worker had already gone upstairs. Sudbai squatted down, then lay on the ground, and moved sideways under the bed. There was dust under the bed, which was a bit choking. At the same time, Sudbai found that there were banners and big character posters under the bed, but the ones outside were the sound of dong 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 going up the stairs was too clear and getting closer. Sudbai had to turn off the flashlight and had no time to look at the banners and big character posters. Take a deep breath, then hold it. According to the traditional explanation in the movie, zombies should only rely on the breath of living people to find people. Although Sudbai didn't know if holding his breath was still effective, he felt that he should try it. Boom. 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 The footsteps became clearer and closer. The female white-collar worker had already walked up the stairs and turned into this room. Boom. 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 Sudbai could feel the vibration on the ground. The other party had already come, and was walking towards the bed. Fingers, clenched tightly together. "I hope that woman is right." Boom. 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 "Close, close. I'm coming." Sudbai could even feel the cold air blowing on his face, with a touch of moisture. Immediately afterwards, the female white-collar worker seemed to stop at the edge of the bed. "Stop moving." Sudbai felt relieved. It seemed that it really worked. However, Just when Subai breathed a sigh of relief, his eyes subconsciously moved upward, and then, in an instant, he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Less than 10 centimeters away from his face, on the lower edge of the bed, there was a face, an upside-down face, a smashed face, staring at him. Only then did Subai realize that the female white-collar worker had been with her head down and legs up. The dong-dong-dong sound she made when she went up the stairs was not the sound of walking with her feet, but the sound of her head hitting the ground while moving. The sound made. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 3. This twisted, sunken, and smashed face was smashed out by Subai himself. Although it was his own masterpiece, looking at it at such a close distance, the visual impact was unimaginable unless he experienced it personally. Subai felt that all the hairs on his body were standing on end. He felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Even the most daring person would react instinctively when faced with the shock of such a scene. Hee, you are here, hee, you are here. The female white-collar worker's lips were rotten, but she still smiled with her teeth exposed. Her mouth kept emitting a stench like salted fish, which could make people faint. Boom. The female white-collar worker grabbed the bed with both hands in opposite directions, and then the whole bed was overturned. Subai rolled and got up from the ground, but at this time, the female white-collar worker had already rushed over. Ah! A piercing scream came. The scream was not made by Subai, but by the female white-collar worker. At this time, the woman actually came back, and there was an old-looking man beside her. One man and one woman grabbed the female white-collar's foot that was hanging upside down in the air, and lifted the female white-collar up. The woman and the old man were not easy characters to get along with. When Subai turned on the flashlight in his hand, he saw that the faces of the woman and the old man were also livid, and their bodies were as green as when the refrigerator was opened. The ground was filled with a dense white air. They are all ghosts. No. It's all ghost stuff. Subai took a deep breath. He kept suppressing his chaotic emotions. He was a very calm person. He was always so calm no matter when he was taking an exam, when he was in love, or when he was killing someone. Calm, but in the face of such things that are beyond the scope of ordinary people's thinking, it is already a bit impossible to maintain that absolute calmness. Moreover, Subai really didn't know what to do. The living do not know how to do it. But the dead. No. Fire, fire, burn her, burn her. The woman shouted to Subai while firmly holding one of the female white-collar's feet. At this time, as the female white-collar worker kept struggling, the woman and the old man seemed a little reluctant. It was obvious that they could not control the female white-collar worker. Moreover, even if the female white-collar worker's legs were grabbed and lifted up, her hands could not touch the ground, and her head could not touch the ground. She couldn't touch the ground, so she couldn't move, but she began to bite the woman's body crazily and desperately grabbed the woman's legs with both hands. Right in front of Subai, the woman's legs had been scratched out of flesh and blood, her lower abdomen had been bitten with a bloody hole, and some of her black intestines had flowed out. The woman's body was already shaking. Although she was a dead person, her body had its limits, and the female white-collar worker was obviously more powerful. There was actually black smoke on her claws. She was holding onto the back of the woman's body. The body also seemed to be on fire. The old man on the other side opened his mouth and exposed his black teeth. He hugged the female white-collar's legs with both hands and turned the female white-collar towards him in a daze. Obviously, the old man didn't want the woman to be grabbed and bitten to death by the white-collar woman. Fire, fire, fire. Subai's eyes kept wandering around, then he saw a simple gas stove in the corner, ran over and turned on the gas stove. Pap. 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 Sudbai kept lighting the fire, but it still couldn't light, and no sparks came out of the gas stove. Turning his head and looking to the other side, the old man had been chewed to a pulp by the female white-collar worker, and his body was about to collapse. Damn it! Sudbai squatted down, grabbed the gas can and shook it constantly, then stood up to light the fire. Pap! Fire, fire! The flames finally started to rise. Sudbai immediately turned around. There were a lot of banners and big character posters under the bed before. Sudbai remembered it clearly. At this time, he immediately ran over and picked up these banners and big character posters, then put them on the fire and lit them. Rushed towards the female white-collar worker. At this time, Sudbai didn't care, and he didn't care whether the fire would also hurt the two ghosts who were helping him, so he threw the burning banners and big character posters over. However, something happened that surprised Sudbai. The woman and the old man were obviously afraid of fire, and as the flames touched them, they themselves let out painful wails, but they still took the initiative to pull the burning banner over themselves. Body, and then wrapped his body tightly around the female white-collar worker. They are going to die together with the female white-collar workers. What kind of deep hatred is this? He really won't let the other person go even to death. The firelight reflected the faces of the woman and the old man, and Sudbai suddenly felt a shiver in his mind. He must have seen this woman and the old man somewhere before, but now he can't remember them. The female white-collar worker was struggling desperately. She was afraid of fire, but the woman and the old man beside her pressed her tightly. Finally, the three dead people burned together completely, and the firelight also showed a strange green color. Boom! The last scream was still echoing in his ears, and there were only 3 balls of black ashes left on the ground. At this time, the sound of the radio sounded again. This time, Sudbai was not in the car, but in this unfinished building, but the sound of the light waves was still so clear. Sudbai even felt that even covering his ears would not help. Listener friends, at the end of the story, I just want to say that good and evil will be rewarded in the end. It's not that they won't be rewarded because the time has not yet come. Well, thank you all for listening to today's horror radio, thank you for your company, and we will meet at the next broadcast time slot. Listeners who want to follow the latest information of our horror broadcast can follow the public WeChat ID of our broadcast. Click on Add Friend in the upper right corner of WeChat. The public WeChat ID number is Kongbu66. Maybe next time, in our story the protagonist is you. As soon as the sound on the radio disappeared, Sudbai felt dizzy, and then he fell to the ground. When he woke up in a daze, he was shocked to find that he was lying at the door of the ranking bar. He immediately stood up. Get up, there is no sign of the car around. Diddy, let's leave immediately. The driver has already taken the order. Please wait a moment. Suddenly the taxi app notification sound came from the phone. Sudbai immediately picked up the phone and looked at the time carefully. He was very sensitive to time. After all, he came to this bar to kill someone, so everyone you must grasp the timing, otherwise you may lead yourself into the water. However, the time displayed on the mobile phone clearly showed the time when he had just walked out of the ranking bar, which was exactly the time when he had just walked out of the side door and planned to take a taxi to leave. What happened? Have you been dreaming before? Sudbai lowered his head and looked at himself, and found that there was no injury on his body, and his clothes were intact, without any injuries. Looking at his whole body, it really felt like he was in a dream. But could it really be a dream? Such a real dream? Was it because he had just killed the female white-collar worker that he had a dream about her coming to claim her life? Just as Sudbai's mind was racing with thoughts, a bid stopped in front of Sudbai. A sleepy driver pulled down the window and asked Sudbai, "Did you take Diddy? This is not the driver in the dream." This driver looks to be in his 20s and has a thin face. He is not the same driver in the dream who killed someone with his car. Subai was stunned. At this time, he had basically regained consciousness. Regardless of whether everything he had experienced before was a dream, it would be dangerous for him to stay here now. He immediately got into the car. This time, he sat in the back on the seat position. The driver started the car. Subai held the mobile phone, and the official account number mentioned in the broadcast in the dream suddenly appeared in his mind. He clicked on his WeChat, pointed at Add Friend in the upper right corner, and put the string of characters, enter Kongbu 66. Finally, take a deep breath and press OK to search. Immediately afterwards, Subai's chest suddenly suffocated, and a WeChat official account was actually searched. This is not a dream, this may not really be a dream. Subai clicked into the official account. Welcome to the Horror Broadcast public WeChat account. As our listeners, we sincerely hope that you can live longer and contribute more popularity to our broadcast / Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 4. He went to 3 locations and changed cars several times. In the early morning, Subai arrived at the dormitory area of his school. The dormitory area of his major was in the old building. The concierge was an aunt who had just divorced. The aunt also stayed there at night. I don't guard the door much anymore, and I don't know how to lock the door. I go to bed as soon as I have dinner in the evening, and students who come in and out can just push the door by themselves. Moreover, there are no cameras here. It seems that since the first murder, Subai has developed an instinctive rejection of cameras. He hates anything that can record his whereabouts. After walking into the dormitory building, he turned directly into the public toilet. The innermost door was clamped by Subai with wires. He turned over and climbed up. Then he changed the clothes in the basin and put them on before going out. Subai put his clothes and shoes in the basin, and then went to the faucet to take a shower, and came out wet. The towel covered the basin, blocking the clothes and sneakers inside. He was now wearing a sweatshirt on the upper body and shorts on the lower body. His strong muscles were exposed, his hair was wet, and he smelled a little tired. Pushing open the door of his dormitory and walking in, Subai sat down on bed number 1. Some water was deliberately sprinkled on the face of a fair boy on the bed. The boy opened his eyes sleepily and looked at it for a long time. It's Subai. Subai, have you taken a shower? Well, I couldn't sleep, it was too hot, so I took a shower. After responding, Subai left an impression on him and went to his berth number 4. This dormitory accommodated 4 people. The odd-numbered berths were in the lower berths and the even-numbered berths were in the upper berths. On his bed, Subai hung a curtain for himself, which was dark brown and opaque. Lying in bed, what I was thinking about was not the scene of my murder today, but the incident of this terrorist broadcast. Compared with this incident, my murder seemed to be completely out of the spotlight. Even from the perspective of instinctive inner feelings, Subai seemed to be a little uninterested even when making these alibi. Although that guy Chu Zhao had always said that his alibi seemed too artificial, as long as he didn't do it in the early stage. Everything was fine as long as the police suspected him, but Subai still subconsciously went through the entire process. Lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep at all. After killing someone, I would be very exhausted after a short period of mental excitement after killing someone, and I couldn't sleep well. This time, I couldn't sleep at all. After lying on the bed for half an hour, Subai sat up. There was a computer desk on the bed. He spread it out and turned on the laptop. After entering the start interface, he directly entered the hidden document. This is a file with the name X. There are 7 folders in the hidden folder, each folder contains its own murder information, and there are 7 target persons in total. The first to 6th ones are either pickpockets or fugitives. Killing these people can be very simple and easy as long as you choose a suitable place, a suitable opportunity, and a suitable alibi. In fact, although police documentaries on crime detection are constantly being played on TV, the ones shown are basically those that have been successfully solved, so it gives the audience the same propaganda feeling that criminal traffickers will inevitably not escape the law. But there are still a large number of cases that the police have no clue about. Subai knows very well that as long as the most basic anti-investigation elements are grasped for any murder crime, it will be difficult for the police to catch it. At the same time, he is still a murderer without motive and no subjective goal. The police cannot trace him back to him based on the social relationship of the deceased, so he can appear safer. After all, not all police officers in the real world are Sherlock Holmes. This female white-collar worker was a target chosen by Subai, who was not a fugitive or pickpocket. It was also because his addiction began to grow that he chose a different level of target for the first time. Subai clicked on the 7th folder, which was the information of the female white-collar worker. Her name was Lu Shanshan, she was 28 years old and now worked as a secretary in a company. Below is the information Subai collected about her. This woman had been involved in illegal fundraising and many other projects. It was basically a kind of economic fraud, such as deceiving people into saying she was a financial person from Taiwan or Hong Kong. The platform is about to land in mainland China. Now, if you put money in advance, how much room will there be for appreciation? Many people have been deceived into investing all their belongings in it, but in the end they have lost everything, and many people have lost their families because of this. However, I don't know what path this woman took. After other people who were involved in these things went to jail, she was still living a good life outside. But she was indeed suspected of it, because a member of Chu Zhao's family, the nanny, was deceived by her and gave her life savings. Of course, it was also because people can't control their inner greed. Seeing that the money became more and more every day after they put it in, the nanny became even more jealous and persuaded herself. My son and daughter-in-law mortgaged their houses and invested all their money. In the end, when everything came to light, the nanny could not bear the blow and committed suicide by taking a large amount of sleeping pills at Chu Zhao's house. This time, Chu Zhao helped Subai a lot in selecting the target, but Chu Zhao and Subai did not agree. Similarly, Subai has a homicidal obsession, while Chu Zhao purely wants to pursue excitement. As the information continued to scroll down, Subai's pupils shrank suddenly. He saw a picture. In the picture, a group of people held banners and big character posters to petition in front of the government agency. Inside, there was an old couple holding a banner that read, "Black-hearted developers have stolen people's hard-earned money, please ask the government for justice." And that old couple were the ones he had seen in the unfinished building before, burning the white-collar woman to death with a burning banner. No wonder I felt familiar when I saw them. It's just that when I was looking for target information before, I only looked at the previous things about this woman, or the most obvious thing that was closest to me. The rest of the information and things were just a casual glance without looking at it in detail. It seems that this woman is also involved in some unfinished building projects. Terror Broadcast concluded by saying that good and evil will be rewarded in the end. Subai suddenly felt a chill on his back. What on earth was this Terror Broadcast? Is it just a supernatural event? Buzz. The phone vibrates. Subai glanced at the call notification. It was a call from Chu Zhao. "Hey, I'm here," Subai said. There was a brief silence on Chu Zhao's side, as if the other party was organizing his words. Finally, he spoke. "Subai, have you implemented your plan today?" Chu Zhao asked. Subai's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that there was something wrong with the plan and his identity would be exposed soon? Chu Zhao comes from a family of policemen, and Chu Zhao himself is also a policeman, so every time he helps Subai make a plan, he always feels a special and strange pleasure. This feeling makes him even more fascinated. Something happened, Subai asked tentatively, pressing the record button on the phone. Mom, answer me quickly, have you implemented it or not? Chu Zhao almost yelled on the other end. Is she dead? Subai asked. Dead. Chu Zhao took a deep breath, died of a heart attack. There were no external wounds on his body. The owner of the nightclub called the police, and the forensic doctor also came to examine it and determined that the cause of death was an accident. The possibility of homicide has been ruled out. Hearing this answer, Subai subconsciously held the knife on the bedside, feeling the cold feeling conveyed by the knife, and the emotions in his heart fluctuated even more. I clearly used this knife to stab the opponent's chest and stir it half a circle, how could it be a heart attack? Did you scare her to death before taking action? Chu Zhao continued to ask. Haha, this is really the most perfect alibi. Brother, you completed a perfect crime. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 5. It wasn't until the morning that Subai fell into a deep sleep, with various thoughts constantly running through his mind. At this moment, Subai realized that the tough nerves he was so proud of before were actually so vulnerable. I had several dreams. In the dreams, there were images of female white-collar workers sneering at me with a knife stuck in their chests. At the same time, there were also the deep and leisurely voices on the horror radio. It wasn't until noon that Subai opened his eyes with a splitting headache, took away the notebook from his body, and opened the curtain. A man in police uniform was sitting on the lower bunk opposite. Subai's arms trembled momentarily, his heart became tense, and his breathing became extremely difficult. At this time, the policeman raised his head and showed a young smiling face. Looks like it scared our baby. Chu Zhao's guy looked like I didn't mean it. Subai took a deep breath, resisted the urge to beat Chu Zhao, tidied the things on the bed, and then came down with his cell phone. Come on, let's eat. I've ordered takeout for you. Chu Zhao pointed to the takeout bag on the desk. Subai shook his head, I have no appetite. Chu Zhao was a little surprised and said with a smile, this is not your first time. Why does it feel bigger this time than the first time you did that? Subai licked his lips. He didn't know whether he should tell Chu Zhao about the terrorist broadcast. Killing and dead people were not sensitive words for the two of them and for this small club, but the terrorist broadcast was obviously. If you tell me about an incident that goes beyond ordinary people's thinking patterns, will the other people in the club think that you have gone to extremes, or in layman's terms, that you are crazy? This is a club that has only been established for a year. There are only 4 people in total. They don't have much experience and even seem immature, but they dare to set up a stage to do this kind of thing. Therefore, if any one of the 4 people has a problem, it will affect the other 3 people. If they think that they are suffering from a mental illness that they cannot control or even start to have hallucinations, how will they treat themselves? Sometimes, Subai himself felt that it was ridiculous. 4 young people formed this club in a flash of enthusiasm. More than 10 people had even died due to the operation of this club, but this club still remained. It seems so simple and loose. That incident was deemed an accidental death, so don't put any more pressure on me. You didn't even do any related investigation or other things. Even though you peed around like an old dog near the nightclub and left a pile of, even if I pile up traces of myself, I won't be able to find you. That's not what I was thinking about. Subai waved his hand, then picked up the towel and wash basin. You sit down for a while, and I'll go wash up. Chu Zhao nodded. In the public toilet, after brushing his teeth, Subai immersed his entire face in a basin of cold water. Then he suddenly raised his head and raised a splash of water. He wiped his face with a towel. Subai was holding something. After walking out of the toilet, at this moment, a not very tall student bumped into Subai's arms. Subai took 2 steps back, and the little man sat directly on the ground, his clothes and pants getting wet. Sorry. The little man immediately stood up and apologized to Sudbai. Sudbai nodded, ignored the matter, and walked back to the dormitory. In the dormitory, Chu Zhao was still holding a book about psychological crimes on Sudbai's desk and leaning on the balcony beside the bed, reading it with gusto. "Are you okay today? Can you read a book at my place so leisurely? I just have a mission. Visiting students." "Yes, visiting students. And you just spent time in my dormitory. There is nothing to visit. 3 bodies of teachers have been lost in the laboratory." Chu Zhao smiled bitterly and said, "I can't just ask a student when I see him in school, 'Hello classmate, where have you seen any corpses recently?'" Sudbai walked to the windowsill while changing his clothes. Behind the old dormitory building was the large playground. At this time, he could see 2 policemen in police uniforms visiting students on the playground. "Everyone else is doing things, and you are here to play. This is indeed a dark society," Sudbai said. "Come on, my eldest son Su, can our eldest brother not laugh at the second brother? It's not like you don't know that I was forced by my father. Growing up, every time I made a mistake, when he came home, he didn't even have time to drag off his clothes, so he took out his belt and started to deal with me. This made me have a natural fear and disgust towards the police profession since I was a child. When I grew up, they forced me to apply for the police academy and become a police officer. Haha, you know this is a how do you feel? It feels a bit like being forced to have sex with a female corpse that died in a car accident," Sudbai described it. "Although your metaphor is disgusting, it is indeed very appropriate." Chu Zhao closed the book. "Teacher General lost 3. What do you think is the reason?" "I'm not a policeman, I'm just a student," Sudbai shrugged. "If you were an ordinary student, I wouldn't be here." Chu Zhao took out a cigarette, handed one to Sudbai, and then supported the balcony with both hands. "Sunur said she wanted to quit, and her family wanted to. She went to work at the British Embassy, and as you know, Gufan originally joined because he wanted to pursue Sunur, but now Sunur is planning to quit, and he also showed that he doesn't want to continue playing. A murder club established entirely by young people pursuing excitement is now facing the trend of disintegration." Sudbai took a puff of cigarette and choked for some reason. Cough cough cough. Chu Zhao patted Sudbai on the back to help him calm down. Sudbai took out a piece of tissue and wiped his mouth. "Maybe, this is a very good ending. Our club has been carrying more than 10 lives. Now everything looks very clean, but we often walk by the river. There are no shoes that don't get wet. Tisk, 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 this is not something you should say. Moreover, although the people we killed should not be sentenced to death according to legal procedures, they are not pure and good people. Killing them doesn't mean anything to me anyway. Guilt, as for you, haven't you already had that habit ingrained into your bones? If the club is gone in the future, it will be difficult for you to have fun again." Chu Zhao was worthy of being a policeman. After saying this, he seemed to suddenly think of something. "Have you found something that can excite you more?" Sudbai smiled. "Maybe." Just when Sudbai wanted to continue talking, Chu Zhao's cell phone rang. "Hey, Captain, I'm checking in the dormitory building." "Oh, okay, close the team, I'm here." Chu Zhao and Sudbai raised their mobile phones. "I'm leaving first. The 4 of us will come out to talk about the club matters in 2 days. Let's break up." In the evening, Sudbai studied by himself in a classroom, sorting out a paper he was working on. He didn't really like going to the library to do this kind of thing. Sometimes an empty study room with only a few people made people feel lonely. A sinking feeling. After the paper was finalized, Sudbai planned to go outside to buy a drink from the vending machine, smoke a cigarette, and come back to revise the paper again and finalize it. At this time, there were 2 other students in the classroom, a boy and a girl, sitting at the front desk in the leftmost row and the front desk in the rightmost row respectively. Sudbai was sitting in the back in the middle. He walked out of the classroom, took out a cigarette, lit it, then took out the banknotes from his wallet and stuffed them into the vending machine. Ding dong. Subai bent down and took out a bottle of hot canned coffee from under the vending machine. At this time, a gust of fragrant wind blew. "Brother Su, please buy me a drink. I don't have any money." Subai stood up and said, "I just took out the change. Take it out and put in the coins yourself." After saying that, Subai walked to his classroom with the coffee. The girl on the spot looked a little embarrassed. When Subai sat down again in the classroom and was about to revise the paper again, the girl from before also walked into the classroom with her bag on her back. It seemed that she was very dissatisfied with Subai's attitude towards her before. He didn't say hello to Subai this time, nor did he choose to sit closer to Subai. Instead, he directly chose a seat in front of the middle and sat down. Putting bags, taking headphones, snacks, makeup mirrors, books, and pens, they kept making noises that made the other two students in the classroom frown. Some people came to the classroom to read for a while, and they had to prepare for work. Doing it for too long. But then, a piercing scream came from the girl's mouth. "Ah!" Subai stood up and looked at the girl holding a bloody human skin in her hand. The new book set sail. Xiaolong is rolling around here asking for recommendation votes and clicks to collect. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Xiaolong. Chapter 6. Chu Zhao and Subai squatted together in the flower garden next to the teaching building, staring at each other with big eyes. "I only asked you at noon what you thought about the loss of the general teacher in the school laboratory, and you actually gave me the answer at night," Chu Zhao muttered dissatisfiedly, which meant that Subai knew about it during the day but didn't tell me at night. He made him feel like he had to get out of bed and rush over, full of deep boudoir resentment. Subai rolled his eyes at Chu Zhao. "Didn't you see what that scalp looks like?" "I was dizzy and timid, so I didn't look," Chu Zhao replied. "You can still be a policeman like this. As you all know, I have connections through the back door." Chu Zhao stood up and stretched. "That's not the scalp of the general education teacher. Each and every one of the general education teachers has been soaked in formalin for how long, and has been tossed and tossed by students for an unknown number of times. How can there still be fresh blood left in their scalps? And the scalp tissue is very delicate and soft, and it probably died not long ago, or it may have been carefully preserved for a period of time." Chu Zhao stared at Subai with a perverted look. "Ri, have you taken it out and looked at it?" "I was at the scene when the scalp was found. I am also one of the witnesses. Of course I will go and take a look before the police come." "Oh, that's fresh human skin, doesn't that mean?" Chu Zhao simply took out another cigarette and prepared to light it, but a gust of wind blew and the lighter failed to light up several times. "Fresh human skin. No one has reported intentional injury or anything like that before. It's almost like it was a homicide." Chu Zhao, who had been unable to light a cigarette, was so angry that he threw the cigarette and lighter on the ground, stretched out his foot and stepped on it twice. "Doesn't this mean I can't go back tonight?" Subai looked at Chu Zhao with a "what are you talking about" expression, but Chu Zhao was indeed a weird policeman. When a murder occurred, what he was thinking about was that he would not be able to sleep well tonight. "Chu Zhao, what are you doing there?" A middle-aged man stood at the door of the first floor of the teaching building and shouted to the side. "He, my brother-in-law, is the captain of the criminal police team. It's too late for someone else's brother-in-law to flatter his brother-in-law, so he only knows how to train me to death, damn." Chu Zhao put on his police hat and said, "Let's go, come with me. Captain Sun, I am investigating the situation. This is Subai, who is also one of the witnesses at the scene where human skin was found. Team Sun has a Chinese character face, a smooth accent when speaking, and a crew cut, which gives people a very masculine look. He glanced at Subai and then asked, "Have you finished the transcript?" Subai nodded, "It's done. I've said everything that needs to be said." After hearing this, Captain Sun didn't say anything and said directly to Chu Zhao, "The superiors have decided to conduct a blanket search of the entire campus now. Our police force is insufficient. Please contact the school administration or the student union of this school. Dispatch some reliable people to help." "Yes." Chu Zhao turned around and left, and Subai followed. When the two of them walked away, Chu Zhao immediately grimaced and said, "It's a trap, and we need to search like a carpet. If you find a piece of scalp, not foot skin, you will definitely need to conduct a blanket search. This is normal. Subai, tell me, it would be great if all the murderers were just like you, just killing people more simply. Just kill people, cut off their skin and litter them everywhere, which makes me still have to work as a sanitation worker here." Subai. The police led the team, and the students in the student union were assigned to various police officers. The school turned on all the lights on the campus, and the students themselves started searching with flashlights or searchlights on their mobile phones. 700 to 800 people were searching together, with the focus area centered around the teaching building where the scalp was found. The search results quickly began to come together, much more easily than imagined. Human flesh was found in the flower garden, human flesh was found in other classrooms, human flesh was found in the toilet, and even human flesh was found in the mezzanine behind the vending machine. In short, within an hour of the start of the search, dozens of scattered pieces of human flesh were found. This automatically makes everyone's search more exciting. Yes, Subai found that the surrounding students were even more diligent in searching. Even if they knew what they were looking for, being able to find the target item with such a high probability was indeed a boost for the searchers. Needle. Chu Zhao and Subai are always slacking off. Chu Zhao is also a great guy. After being forced by his family to become a policeman, his rebellious psychology has reached a perverted level. It can be seen from the fact that he is even willing to join the murder club. There are many clues coming out. He has a feeling of rejection from the bottom of his heart towards his job and his police uniform. Suner once said that all 4 people in this club are mentally ill, which makes sense. What they are looking for is human flesh, part of a corpse. "It feels like they are playing a treasure hunt game," Chu Zhao said, leaning against a tree. "That's how people are." Subai looked around, then looked at Chu Zhao. "Don't move." "What's wrong?" Chu Zhao was stunned, and then he started to raise his head and look up following Subai's gaze. Above the tree he was leaning on, hidden among the branches, there was a bird's nest. But there was obviously something dark placed in the bird's nest. "Give me your hand, I'll go up and have a look." After Subai said this, he started running towards Chu Zhao. Chu Zhao squatted on horseback, then folded his hands together. When Subai's feet stepped on his hands, he pushed up with force. Subai jumped up, grabbing the branch with one hand, and the other one hand was placed on the bird's nest, and then he caught a fluffy thing that felt cold and wet. In short, this feeling was very bad, and Subai felt a layer of gloom in his heart. Fortunately, he was indeed quite experienced in this aspect. Jumping down from the tree, Subai threw the thing in his hand directly to Chu Zhao. Chu Zhao held it in his arms and looked at the thing in his arms with a confused expression. "That's okay too. Your luck is indeed suitable for being a policeman. If you are lazy, you can still find someone to kill you." What Chu Zhao was holding was a human head. The head was bloody, with blood overflowing around the eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, giving it a terrifying feeling. But Subai just threw his head to Chu Zhao, and Chu Zhao was not frightened out of his wits. He could still make fun of him calmly. It can be seen that Chu Zhao is not as good as his habitual words. Frivolous and unbearable. Otherwise, he would not join that club and do those things. Whether he admits it or not, the blood of being a policeman does flow in his heart, but he is unwilling to face it formally. Taking out his mobile phone, Chu Zhao called Captain Sun directly. "Hi, brother-in-law. It's working time now, don't call me brother-in-law, you should." After hearing these opening words, Chu Zhao cut off the phone and rolled his eyes at Subai. "I mean, do all police officers need to be like this?" Subai took the head and used the flashlight function of his mobile phone to shine on the head and examine it carefully. She is a female, probably in her early 20s. If nothing else, she should be a female student in the school. For the time being, these were the only things that could be seen. Subai was not a forensic doctor after all, and he was too lazy to do too detailed an examination at this time. Soon, Captain Sun, Chu Zhao's brother-in-law, called back. "Hello." Chu Zhao answered the phone. "You're still angry, right?" "You." Snapped. Chu Zhao hung up the phone again. Then he squatted next to Subai and looked at the head together. These two people seem to be young people, and they can be regarded as the second generation, but they are different from those second generations who only know how to race cars and play with women. The things they like and try are definitely beyond the scope of ordinary people's interests, and even somewhat sensational. When we reported the situation before, how many pieces of meat were found in total, Subai suddenly asked. Chu Zhao was stunned for a moment and calculated carefully. It's almost 70 or 80 yuan. Now, it's probably over 100 yuan. Someone is imitating the crime. Subai pursed his lips and said, "Do you know which one he is imitating?" Chu Zhao looked at Subai with an expression that said, "You thought I was mentally retarded. No matter how unqualified I am as a police officer, I still know about that case, okay? You mean the mutilated corpse case, right?" Subai nodded. "This year is the anniversary of the mutilated corpse case. The criminal suspect is using a new case to pay tribute to it." Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. This corpse dismemberment case occurred 30 years ago, and the victim was a sophomore female student. The victim's body fragments were found on Motor Road by an ant doing morning exercises a week after her disappearance. In order to eliminate traces of the crime, the murderer heated the body until it was cooked and cut it into thousands of pieces. After the incident, the local public security department used police forces to conduct a large-scale search, but due to a lack of clues, the murderer has not yet been found. If it is really imitating the corpse case, does it mean that we can find thousands of pieces of meat in the school? Chu Zhao made an expression as if he was about to vomit. "I have seen the inside before out of curiosity. Some of the information is much more disgusting than what is posted on the internet. The large basket of minced meat placed there is simply ruining one's outlook." Subai patted Chu Zhao on the shoulder. "Someone keeps saying that he doesn't want to be a policeman, but he actually reads this kind of internal file information. Tisk, tisk, it's okay to be duplicitous. Isn't it good for hobbies?" Chu Zhao shook his head disapprovingly. At this time, his cell phone rang again. This time, Chu Zhao's brother-in-law Captain Sun did not come up and scold him again, but lowered his voice and asked, "Have you discovered something? Otherwise, you wouldn't have the guts to hang up on me like this." "Hey, brother-in-law, I found something." "What about minced meat?" "We have collected more than 300 pieces here. There are minced meat everywhere. Just move the table, move the chair, dig through the grass, open the toilet, and there will be minced meat everywhere." What I found wasn't minced meat. When Captain Sun heard this, his breathing obviously stopped. "What is that?" Human head. Chu Zhao took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth. However, when he was looking for a lighter, he found that he had thrown the lighter away with him. He then went to look at Subai and saw that Subai was squatting on the ground in pain, a little bit surprised. "What's wrong with you? Are you feeling uncomfortable?" Where are you, kid? Bring the head to the office classroom quickly. Hurry up. Oh, okay. Chu Zhao hung up the phone and came to Subai holding the head. What's wrong? Are you feeling uncomfortable? Subai's face turned pale, his body spasmed, and he suddenly felt a sense of suffocation. Then, the voice of the radio host seemed to suddenly appear in his ears. Listener friends, the story of the next radio program is being recorded. Please stay tuned. We will see you in the next program. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 8. After calling Chu Zhao, Subai asks Yang Luhi directly, do you still remember the location of Chen Chu's rental house? Luhi seemed to realize that something was wrong, and hesitated subconsciously, but nodded under Subai's gaze. I know, I helped him move in last time. Subai was indeed a bit withdrawn at ordinary times, so when Chen Chu moved out, he only told Subai. Subai just nodded, and the other party was not embarrassed to ask him to help move things. Get up, Chen Chu must be in trouble. What happened? Luhi hurriedly started to get dressed in a panic. Subai frowned, picked up the phone, flipped through the address book, and finally found Chen Chu's number. Subai immediately called. Sorry, the phone you dialed has been turned off, please call again later. Shut down. Subai blew a breath. According to normal circumstances, a contemporary young man would rarely turn off his mobile phone. Coupled with the previous speculation, Chen Chu was probably in danger, and he didn't know that Chen Chu was in danger. What will be his fate? Will he be cooked and cut into thousands of pieces and scattered in the corner of the campus like his girlfriend, or some other fate? After Luhi put on his clothes, Subai ran out of the dormitory building with him. Outside the dormitory building, a group of police officers had already come over. It looked like they were of high rank, and the boy Chu Zhao was also inside. When Chu Zhao saw Subai, he immediately pointed his finger and said, "That's him. His name is Subai." He provided the identity information of the deceased and other information. This scene made Subai feel a bit toothache. In a daze, it felt a bit like Chu Zhao shouting, "It's him, his name is Subai, and he has killed several people in the club." Fortunately, although the management of the club is loose and the 4 members are free and unrestrained, these 4 people have extraordinary family conditions and have bright futures, so there will not be such a situation of death and destruction. Moreover, every incident, everyone is involved to one degree or another, and no one's ass is clean. A policeman with a somewhat weathered face came over and stared at Subai. You mean, the deceased also had a boyfriend who lived with him and they lived outside the school? Yes, the deceased's live-in boyfriend was my former roommate. The empty bed in my dormitory now belongs to him. He should not be the murderer. He does not have the ability to do such a thing. Moreover, he has not been alive for 3 days. Come to school for class. How did you identify the deceased? Police vicissitudes asked again. Wang Ju, he and I found the head together, so he saw it. Chu Zhao interjected at this time. Wang Ju nodded, and his attitude towards Chu Zhao seemed to be particularly friendly. It seemed that although Chu Zhao was idle at work, his relationship at home was really strong, and only his brother-in-law dared to clean him up a few times. Xiao Sun, you take people to their rental house to check the situation. I will continue to stay here to organize the search for the body. Yes. Captain Sun nodded immediately, then walked up to Subai and asked, do you know the location of their rental house? Yes, I can take you there. Okay, you, and you, come with me. Captain Sun finally pointed at Chu Zhao. A group of 7 or 8 people immediately left the school in 2 police cars. This time they went out just to find out the situation. If something really happened in the rental house, then more manpower and professionals would definitely be involved. Send over. In the car, Subai and Chu Zhao were sitting together. Sudbai asked in a low voice, didn't the surveillance video find anything? It stands to reason that criminals dare to dump corpses in schools, and not just one or two pieces of corpses are thrown away. Now hundreds of pieces of corpses have been found. You can find them if you search carefully in many places such as flower beds, classrooms, toilets, etc. Such a large area and high frequency of dumping bodies corpse, how could it not leave clues in the surveillance cameras? Chu Zhao sighed and said with a smile, it's like seeing a ghost. A group of people have been transferred to check the surveillance, but nothing special happened. It was obviously less than 24 hours after the body was thrown out, or even shorter. But there was nothing unusual in the surveillance. There was even a study room that no one had entered since yesterday to today, but 2 pieces of meat were found in it. Hearing the news, Sudbai suddenly fell silent. If the surveillance cameras didn't capture any clues, then the matter was indeed too weird. Suddenly, Sudbai suddenly remembered his experience yesterday, and couldn't help but look at the radio in the car, but fortunately, the sound did not ring again. Now, Sudbai was full of fear towards that radio, which was a human instinctive fear of the unknown and supernatural phenomena. The car parked in a community outside the school. This is an old community. It can be seen that it is very old. However, if college students and couples rent here, the conditions are always much better than the school dormitories. Under Luhi's guidance, everyone quickly arrived at the second floor of a unit in a residential building. Dong dong dong. Captain Sun went to knock on the door, but no one answered after knocking for a while. Sudbai stood next to the door and covered his nose with his hand. He smelled the smell of blood. Captain Sun suddenly looked at Sudbai at this time, and then he sniffed his nose, and seemed to understand something, but the way he looked at Sudbai became a little different. Sudbai's expression remained unchanged and he said directly, it smells of blood. My nose is very sensitive. I can't be wrong. Rather than being suspected, it is better to speak out openly. Seeing Sudbai say it so generously, the suspicion on Captain Sun's face immediately disappeared. He nodded, took 2 steps back, then sprinted forward and kicked open the door. Vomit. Almost everyone present bent over and started retching, even Captain Sun, the old detective, was no exception, because just kicking the door open was like knocking over the lid of a trash can, and the smell and things inside were all gone. Presented. This is a small house with only 60 bungalows, 2 bedrooms, and 1 living room. The living room can basically be ignored. You have to walk sideways to put a table. In this small hall, there was a chair, and a young man was sitting on the chair. The man's limbs were nailed to the chair with long nails, and the man's entire chest and stomach were hollowed out. Something was stuffed inside, and it was bulging. Protect the scene, don't go in, call for backup, and tell the headquarters that a second murder scene has been discovered here. Captain Sun suppressed his nausea and ordered. Yes. A police officer hurried down the stairs as if he had been granted amnesty to make a phone call. Sudbai and Chu Zhao recovered very quickly. After all, although the smell was unpleasant and the picture was distorted, it was not too special. After the initial discomfort, they could take a closer look at some doorways. That guy's belly is bloated. What is it stuffed with? Pillow. Cotton, Chu Zhao asked confused. Sudbai pointed to the boxes on the floor of the small hall and said, if I guessed correctly, they should be condoms filled with water to make water balloons. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 9. A pair of male and female students who lived together outside the school, the girl, were cooked and cut into thousands of pieces and scattered in every corner of the campus. The boy was nailed to a chair and disemboweled, including all the organs and intestines. They were all dragged out, and then their abdominal cavities were filled with condoms filled with water. The way of death was beyond common sense and extremely miserable. It was not like an ordinary vendetta, it was infinitely close to a religious ritual. When Luhi and Subai walked back together, Luhi almost held his chest all the way. Obviously, for him, the impact of the previous scene was too strong. Subai seemed okay, after all, his character was still different. However, suddenly, I thought of what Chu Zhao said about the surveillance cameras before. It seems that people who can completely avoid surveillance and dump a large number of corpses around a campus really can't do it. At this time, Subai's cell phone started to vibrate. Luhi, you go back to the dormitory first, I'll go back later. Subai said hello to Luhi, and then walked to the barbecue stall at the school gate. Hey, it's me, why are you calling me so late at night? I heard about what happened in your school. Tisk tisk. Sooner on the other end of the phone seemed to be blow-drying her hair. The phone was on speakerphone, so Subai could hear the obvious buzzing electronic sound. The information is quite good. Subai walked to the barbecue stall and looked at the barbecue on it. His Adam's apple moved. It seemed that today was not a good time to eat barbecue. Boss, bring 2 bottles of beer and help me roast some vegetables. No more meat. Haha, why, were you also affected today? To be honest, if this method wasn't so perverted, I would have thought it was something you did in your own school, you homicidal maniac. Subai laughed twice and sat down at a small table. I'm not that ill yet, and I won't operate on my classmates for no reason. You also said that it is just because you are not terminally ill yet. Let me tell you, if your mental illness continues to develop, you will not be far away from becoming a serial murder criminal. I seem to be now. At least the people our club is killing now are not good people. Why do we sound like the Powerpuff Girls or Sailor Moon, shouting to destroy you on behalf of the moon? Haha, that's about it. In fact, we are no different from those who like to play illegal car racing, it's just that we play more boldly and more excitingly. Okay, I'm not going to be poor with you, you know what I'm doing. Chu Zhao told me that you are going to the embassy in the UK. Ah, it's really boring. I even told my dad that I would go to places like Somalia or Syria in the Middle East, but my mom wiped tears beside me and my dad dropped a glass at home. In the end, I had no choice but to go to the UK. As a girl, you really need to calm down. I'm leaving, and the club is about to break up. That's right. You also know why that guy Gufan wants to join this club. If you are gone, he will no longer be happy to play. He and I really have nothing to do with each other. This explanation is like saying you like me. Okay, don't be so pretty. I'm not going to fall in love with a murderer. In the end, you became terminally ill and killed your wife. That would be really sad. There was a pause on the other end of the phone, and Sunar's voice became serious. Seriously, Subai, I will contact the hospital for you after I go to the UK. You can come to the UK for treatment. Your beer and barbecue. The barbecue stall owner brought the beer and barbecue to Subai. Thank you, Subai said to the boss, then picked up the beer bottle and drank directly from it without pouring it into the cup. I think your illness can't be delayed any longer. We are just having a small fight now, and the people we kill are also the trash of society. Plus the 4 of us have family relationships, even if something is exposed, it will be a big deal. We can go together, but in the future, if you really, I'm not worried about myself, I'm just worried about you, you may really ruin your life and your family. I know. Subai took another sip of beer. Subai is very clear about his own affairs and his own problems. He also knows that how his mental illness will develop in the future is completely uncontrollable. In fact, he should be suitable to be a mercenary abroad, but due to family relations, he wants to. If you do that, there will indeed be great resistance, and the Chinese have never been very popular in the mercenary market. In addition, Subai also knows his own abilities. he is a free-fighting and amateur firearms enthusiast. This level is incomparable to those of the princes and princesses. It's okay to show off your hands at a small party and cause some screams and cheers. If you want to go out and make a living by doing this, you will probably be done with it in a short time. I am still too young. Then I will help you find a hospital and contact you after I find it. I need your consent because this is your business. Okay, sure. If you find a place for me to be an exchange student in the UK, it shouldn't be a big problem. Well, that's the best thing you can think of. Sooner blew her hair, lay on the bed, and made a comfortable sound. By the way, where is your girlfriend? Didn't she say that there was a girl in school last time? Is she chasing you, and you are also developing by having dinner with her? We haven't contacted each other for a while, Sudbai said. How can you be in a relationship like this? You are so cold to others. You've said it before. After my illness, I'd better not harm other girls. At this moment, Sudbai saw two people coming from the corner of his eye. One person was holding a dog. The dog was not very big. It was all black and looked very strong, but it had a look that was different from ordinary dogs. The distinguishing characteristic, at least, is that it is not interested in the barbecue leftovers at its feet, and the man holding the dog is wearing a military camouflage sweatshirt, looking very strong and tough. The other man looked thinner and probably younger, but he was actually wearing a pair of sunglasses at night, which looked a bit funny. The two people also sat down at a table at the barbecue stall. What's wrong? What happened? Suner is a very sensitive woman. She can sense many things from the changes in Sudbai's breathing. Nothing, nothing. Okay, you can go to bed early. It's my business. Thank you. That's a big deal. Okay, be careful. I just read the latest reports. There may be someone more perverted and murderous than you hidden near your school. In response, Sudbai hung up the phone. However, in his heart, Sudbai was thinking, is he really a murderer? Or, is all this done by humans? While drinking beer silently, Sudbai kept staring at the man in military camouflage and sunglasses from the corner of his eyes. For some reason, Sudbai felt a strange aura about them. And the two people sitting here don't look like they are out for a walk and eating some late-night snacks. Instead, they look like they are waiting for something to come, looking a bit serious and solemn. At this time, the little black dog ran to Sudbai and began to circle around Sudbai. Sudbai, who was not afraid of killing people, suddenly felt on pins and needles when he was stared at by the little black dog. Return! The man in military camouflage shouted, and the little black dog took another deep look at Sudbai, and then ran back to its owner. The man in sunglasses lowered his voice and was talking to the man in military camouflage. The man in military camouflage nodded and then gave Sudbai a meaningful look. Sudbai put the money on the table, stood up and planned to leave. When walking past the table of the man in military camouflage and sunglasses, the little black dog bared its teeth at Sudbai, looking very fierce. Generally, dogs look fierce and have a sense of lust and fierceness, but this dog, it sounds fierce but carries a deep threat that no one can ignore. The man in sunglasses held a wine bottle in his hand and raised it slightly. Are you leaving? This was said to Sudbai. Sudbai was a little surprised. They didn't know each other for no reason. Did they say hello like this? But he still nodded lightly. Yes, back to school. The man in military camouflage snorted softly. I suggest you sit still for a while. The man in sunglasses shook his head at the man in military camouflage, and then the two continued to face each other, drinking wine and eating barbecue. Sudbai hesitated for a moment, but still chose to cross the road and walk towards the campus. Looking at Sudbai's leaving figure, the man in military camouflage smiled and said, "Why don't you let me stop him? Generally, newcomers will be rewarded if they can survive." The man in sunglasses sighed, "That's not necessary. He has murderous aura. Your little Hay has already smelled it? This is not an ordinary newcomer, at least not an ordinary person. Forcing him to stay before the story starts will cause unnecessary consequences. Conflict. Also, I don't think he can die casually. We can just look for him when the time comes. The new book has set sail, and everyone needs to collect, click and recommend it. Hold on tight to the dragon. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 10. Walking into the school gate, stepping on the tree-lined paths in the campus, the evening breeze blew slowly, giving people a relaxed and comfortable feeling, and all the fatigue seemed to dissipate at this moment. He probably won't be able to sleep tonight. However, no matter how miserable Chen Chu's death was, Subai would have a slight reaction at the moment he saw it, but it would not become Subai's dream. Dimple. However, something that made Subai feel that he didn't know whether it was good or bad was that with Sunur's departure, this murder club would also be disbanded. In the future, if he really couldn't control it, he would have no choice but to go abroad. You should accept mental treatment in this area, otherwise you will become a demon with a hobby of killing innocent people, which is not what Subai wants to see now. Although the people he killed before were not good people, according to the law, the crime was not punishable by death. However, it could at least give Subai a kind of spiritual comfort, just like what he said when he killed the female white-collar worker in the toilet. The same sentence. Although I don't like to talk nonsense, this is the rule of the club. I have to say, your sins have escaped secular sanctions, but they cannot escape our judgment. He forcibly cast a layer of divine justice over his abnormal psychology. Subai continued to walk forward while thinking about his thoughts. Suddenly, he stopped and froze on the spot. Why is it so quiet around here? Even though it is late at night on campus, this should be taken for granted in normal times, but today there are hundreds or even thousands of people playing the game of find meat pieces here, and there is absolutely no way it will end now, so how can it be so quiet? Subai's fingers clenched together silently, and his eyes began to scan the surroundings. The feeling that something was wrong was getting stronger and stronger. However, after waiting for a long time, nothing abnormal happened. Subai decided to continue walking to the dormitory. A figure walked out of the flower garden corridor in front. Who? Subai, it's me. He held a cup of milk tea and said, I just vomited in the flower garden, so I went to buy a cup of milk tea to clear my mouth. Subai nodded. He walked in front, Subai walked behind, and the two returned to the dormitory together. When Subai saw the dormitory ant still sitting at the door of the dormitory, she finally felt more at ease. It seemed that she was too sensitive and was wary of everything. After entering the old dormitory building and reaching the third floor, he took the key and opened the door, and Subai also walked in. Going to take a shower? He asked. No, I don't plan to do that right now. Subai shook his head. At this time, he wanted to lie down on the bed and have a good sleep. Then I'll go to the toilet and take a shower. He took the wash basin, put the towel and shampoo and shower gel in, then took off his clothes and put on his underwear and went out. Suwen took off his shirt, climbed to his bunk, picked up his laptop, and found that the Win 10 system was constantly in a restart cycle after opening it. There should be a problem with the system. Fortunately, Suwen had some important information. Everything has been backed up, so I don't have to worry about the data on my computer being damaged if the system breaks down. But now he really had no intention of reinstalling the system. He put his laptop on the bedside and began to close his eyes and prepare to sleep. At this time, the screen of Luhi's mobile phone on the bed suddenly lit up. Most of today's smartphones are equipped with radio software. At this time, the software automatically opens and starts to play the sound. Hello, listeners, it's time for our horror radio again. Today, we will continue our ghost stories. Please calm down and listen backslash.